Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another Marvel Crisis Protocol character spotlight. And today we are taking a look at the Mr. Lord, Star-Lord himself. And yeah, we're gonna go ahead and get right into things. So obviously, I know Guardians are kind of a bit of a hot topic in the meta right now because they are extremely powerful. But today we're gonna be looking at a character that's kind of overlooked in the Guardians. He has an incredibly good leadership, so obviously his leadership is a huge part of why Guardians is such a powerful affiliation. But today we're going to be focusing kind of more on Star-Lord himself rather than his leadership, just because, that's not really the idea here. We're not talking about the faction as a whole. We're mostly talking about the individual characters and synergies and stuff like that. But without further ado, we're going to go ahead and start looking at his stats here. So Mr. Lord is coming in with 333 defensive line and 6 health. Notably, the only thing that changes on his flip side, other than the art, is that he goes down to 5 stamina, the 6 that he had on the front. So nothing too special there. 6-5 is nice. There are lots of 3 threats that are 5-5, but nothing too noteworthy. He doesn't have any 4s, but also doesn't have any 2s, so I think that's a relatively standard line. He's a 3 threat, as just mentioned. Size 2, medium move, so once again, nothing particularly impressive here. Pretty standard line. Going into his attacks here, he has 2. He has the Element Gun. This is his 5 dice builder. It's range 4, which is quite nice, and it's energy, which is a pretty solid attack type. Certainly beats physical in most cases. And after the attack is resolved, he's going to gain power equal to the damage dealt. No other rules text than that. Very simple attack. Next, we have Full Auto. This is his spender ability here. This is also range 4 energy, so we can already kind of see what range this model likes to operate at. He's got 7 dice on this attack, and it's only costing him 3 power, so it's a relatively inexpensive spender, which is good because his only real way of building power is that builder, so that's pretty solid. Full Auto has a trigger here. It's got the Wild Elemental Blast. After the attack is resolved, for each wild in the attack roll, the defending character gains one of the following conditions: bleed, shock, slow, or stun. So that's nice. It's always nice when you have those wild triggers that can give more than one condition if you get more than one wild. And a lot of those conditions are really good. As a matter of fact, in the right scenario, all of those conditions are really good. Bleed kind of being the outlier of not quite as useful in a lot of cases, but it's still not a bad condition, and especially if you're running him with some affiliated models like Drax who benefit from enemy models having bleed, you can definitely kind of use Star-Lord to tee up nice targets for Drax. So that's pretty cool. And the other conditions are just fantastic on their own. Shock, slow, and stun are all really meaningful conditions if you can put them on the right models. So it's a solid set of conditions to hand out on, a good amount of dice and only a 3-cost spender, so not bad at all. We're going to kind of skip over the leadership here. We might talk about it a little bit, but again, we're kind of focusing on the model himself more so than his leadership, and his leadership's pretty generic and just good for everybody, so yeah. But the first ability we have here is Hit and Run. This is going to be a 2-cost superpower. It's active, so it's going to be used on his turn, and it's also going to cost him an action, and this is a pretty standard one. He makes an attack followed by a move action. Lots of models have very similar abilities. One thing that is nice about it is if you're sitting on enough power, you can do this with a full auto, so that's pretty cool. You can drop a spender and then move to a different position for whatever reason. And obviously, Hit and Run is a very generic ability. A lot of models have this pretty much exact ability, but it's very powerful in the right situation. It can allow him, especially on maps where the kind of secure points are a little bit more spread out, he can do, well, hit and run plays. He can move off of his secure, he can, fire off a shot, maybe a full auto, maybe just an element gun, and then he can use hit and run to get back. Or if he's in range to double tap something, he can shoot it once, shoot it again, and then use the hit and run to get away from them so that he doesn't get murdered by them. Because, range 4 is great, and a lot of enemies don't have that, but those that do, it's nice to force them to do move actions if they want to hit him back, so that's always cool. Especially since, on the full auto, if you're able to do that, you can apply stuff like slow, so then that hit and run becomes really meaningful because they might not even be able to get in range of you with a single move. So that could be really nice in that regard. Next up, Star-Lord has Plucky Attitude. When attacking, if he rolled no hits, he can reroll all of his attack dice, and when defending, if he rolled no shields, he may reroll all of his defense dice. So that can be really nice just when you kind of with an attack, or maybe you got like one wild or one crit that didn't explode into anything. It's especially nice when it's a crit because you have an extra die now that you're re-rolling with it. It's kind of like a mini recal that you can only use if you didn't roll those specific symbols. So yeah, it's certainly not bad to have. It doesn't hurt his odds in any way. Definitely not the most powerful reroll ability in the world, especially since it is contingent on those very specific things, but it is free. It doesn't cost him any power, so obviously it's pretty good in that regard. And when you get to the reroll step on your defense dice, you kind of already know how much damage you're expecting to take here, so you can make an educated decision on that one. And with the attack, you're usually relatively aware of what you're doing as well, so you can decide, if you're not doing any damage as it is, why not? So yeah, it's solid in that regard. Lastly, we have his other passive things here. He has flight, which is, standard and very useful. With hit and run, that can be really nice because you can kind of use that to duck behind buildings and stuff like that. So give yourself line of sight blocking terrain in the way, which can be really, really good. Or, just get on top of a size 5 building or something like that. That can be really nice because, yeah, that makes it even more annoying for your opponent to catch up to you. In addition, he has Gem Bearer Power. So Power Stone's an interesting one. For those unaware, all the Power Stone says is it gives you 1 extra power during the power phase. Now, notably, for every stone you're holding, you also get 1 extra power during the power phase. So with the Power Stone, you're effectively getting 2 additional power during the power phase, but it does increase your threat by 1. So while I think it's interesting with Star-Lord, I mean, being able to always have full auto online is certainly nice, and for that matter, you also always have hit and run online. Of course, not both of them, but by round 2 you do, which is pretty good. Um, that's certainly solid. There's definitely an argument to be made that being able to do a 7 dice attack every round consistently, and then if you build any power from anything else, you can do it twice. There's certainly an argument that that's quite good. But bringing Star-Lord up to a 4 threat and his defensive tech not really being the strongest in the world. I mean, again, Plucky is nice, but it's not crazy. And aside from that, he is just 3/3/3 with 6 or 5 health. So he does just kind of melt if opponents can get into his face. Obviously, hit and run helps with that. If you play him well, you can kind of keep him alive a little longer. But making him 4 threat puts a lot of more of a target on his back, and I don't personally find it worth it very much, but you guys can let me know down in the comments if you think there are places where running the Power Stone is really worth it on him, because like I don't think it's the worst decision you could possibly make, but I don't think it's particularly necessary. I think he can kind of do a lot of the things he's trying to do without it anyways. As far as tactics cards go, Star-Lord is only involved in 1 tactics card. It's for an assignment, and it's not really his, so I'm not going to spend too much time talking about it, and I'm certainly not going to read off this entire list of things. But basically, it's an Agent Venom card that lets Agent Venom do a bunch of different things by being close to the movie Guardians of the Galaxy. And the Star-Lord one is probably one of the best things on the card, which is kind of cool, because, he's the leader, so you're probably bringing him anyways. But basically, it lets Agent Venom make Star-Lord Spender, which is really, really good, and then get a small advance afterwards, which is also really, really good. And one thing that's fun about that was pointed out to me recently is that when he makes that spender, he's using, he's the one making the attack, not Star-Lord. So he's getting his symbiotic instincts, which stops your opponent's rerolls from happening, which is really, really good. That can be super effective, and yeah, it's a good way to hand out extra conditions and stuff like that. So there's definitely a bit of a synergy with Agent Venom there with that card, and specifically in the Guardians of the Galaxy affiliation. But yeah, I mean, it's not really Star-Lord's card, so I don't want to spend too much time talking about it here. As far as affiliations go, Star-Lord is only a part of the Guardians of the Galaxy. And looking really quickly here just to see if he has really any specific synergies here. There's certainly not many things that are bad for him here. As we already mentioned, he does have that card with Agent Venom, which is quite good. His leadership obviously is really, really powerful. I don't really want to spend much time on it, but it is a crazy good leadership, and pretty much any model in the game appreciates it, but especially a lot of the Guardians. I mean, CGR being an obvious one, but a lot of these other models can benefit as well. Rocket can be great with it. Beta Ray can be great with it. Make him really obnoxious to take down. So definitely some good stuff there. But in terms of specific kind of model synergies with them, we already talked a little bit about Drax and Drax has basically this thing where if the target's bleeding, he can get 2 rerolls. So Star-Lord can kind of tee up some good hits for Drax there with the Spender, and then of course that helps Drax build power as well, so that's really, really good. So that's nice. In addition, stuff like CGR, that's a condition that Star-Lord can't hand out himself, the Incinerate one, and that's another point for Agent Venom as well, as both of them can throw out Incinerate, so that's kind of good. That's not an anti-synergy, I guess is the better way of phrasing that, but that's pretty useful. But otherwise, I don't think he really has specific strong synergies with any of these models too much. But he definitely supports them really well between his leadership and also just kind of not getting in their way. Him and Rocket can sometimes kind of fall into a similar role, and to some degree even Agent Venom, but there's a lot of models here that can kind of go up on the front line and be those close combat melee units, while Star-Lord gets to kind of skirmish, play the hit and run game a little bit more, and these other models can kind of take the heat off of him. So he definitely appreciates that. Stuff like Drax, stuff like Gamora, stuff like Beta Ray, and Angela as well. Those are all kind of models that'll get up in your opponent's face and take some of the heat off of him. So he definitely appreciates those types of models. Looking at other affiliations, I don't know if there's too many places where he has a particularly strong synergy. One of the ones that I did think of while I was just kind of workshopping what I wanted to talk about in this video is actually new Steve in Avengers. I haven't tried him there myself, but being able to help him pull a couple extra wilds here and there on those spenders and just throwing out a few extra conditions could be really, really fun. So that's, I think, something that could be interesting for him. Just running under that Earth's Mightiest Heroes leadership, I think, is at least solid. But I don't think he cares too much for the other ones here. I mean, he is a 3 threat, so Sam doesn't hate him, but he's not particularly bulky, so he doesn't quite fit kind of the ideal model for Sam. Steve doesn't mind what he's trying to do. I mean, for one, Steve can bodyguard and help keep him alive when he is in danger. And he puts hit and run on line turn 1, so that's interesting at least. You can kind of do some fun stuff with that, because it's a range 4, you can shoot the midline pretty consistently with a medium move. So you can move up, hit and run, shoot the midline, and then move on to the midline or move to a back point or whatever you got to do. But yeah, there's some play with that there, but I don't think it's like the biggest deal in the world for him having that 1 extra power turn 1. I do also think there's interesting play for a Strucker Hydra list. Just in a kind of condition focused list. Star-Lord isn't the best at it because he doesn't hand anything out on his builder, but he does have pretty good ways of handing out a lot of conditions on his spender, and kind of that ability to hand out more than one with a single attack is really nice there. So if you really just want to bog your opponent down with conditions, that's definitely somewhere you could see kind of hit some synergy with Strucker, and honestly might be an argument to run him with the Power Stone, just to allow him to do that spender more often, again, as early as turn 1 if you really want to, and throw out more of those conditions as often as you can. So I think that could be a lot of fun. Whether or not it's good, I couldn't tell you, but it's definitely something that I think would be interesting. And hey, now that I'm thinking about it, honestly, I kind of want to try it. But yeah, I think that's more of a fun synergy than necessarily a good one. So I was thinking about this a little more, and I actually don't hate him with Arnim Zola either, and it's weird because now I'm really wanting to try this list. But you could put Scientific Method on him because he is a 3 threat, and that suddenly gives him defensive tech. So now not only is he hit and running and kind of skirmishing away from your opponent fairly often, but he's also going to have that extra thing of, yeah, they're probably burning move actions to get to him, and then once they get to him, they have to pay an extra 2 if they don't want him to have 5 dice defense. So that's certainly interesting, and I mean, that also potentially makes Plucky even better, because if you don't roll a shield on those 5 dice, which I've had that happen a lot, um, you can Plucky it, which that's 5 dice. That's pretty good. Um, I think it's interesting. Again, I don't know how good it is, but it's certainly an interesting synergy. And giving him access to a Mystic Attack doesn't hurt, and a 6 dice went out with that, so that's not bad at all. Backing out of Hydra, because I like that idea way, way, way too much. I think there's a couple other places where he'd probably do okay. I don't know if any of them stand out as being particularly strong, but for the same reason he's good with something like Drax being able to tee up those bleeds, I can see him being okay in Midnight Suns. Web Warriors, he certainly plays the hit and run kind of strategy, but I don't know if he quite has the bulk or really the mobility that they're looking for, so I don't think it's anything particularly special there. And then another one that kind of jumps out at me is Shield, just because they tend to be very good at running kind of a gunline sort of thing, and I do think he fits that sort of playstyle fairly well. But again, they kind of have a lot of models that do that just as good, if not better. So, I don't think it's bad necessarily, but I don't think it's anything particularly special either. Other honorable mentions go to something like Black Order or Asgard, not necessarily because I think he particularly benefits from their leadership or their playstyle really, but because they have other affiliated Guardians models in them that can kind of allow you to do a relatively easy dual affiliation splash. For example, throwing him in Black Order allows you to do if you pull 15 threat, which is historically a bit of a problem scenario for Black Order, if they're running two Stone Thanos, of course. If they're running one, it works out a lot better. But at two Stone Thanos, they can't really run him at 15 threat, or at least they can't run him with the ideal team. It can be a little awkward. So instead, what you could do is you could run Star Lord. This is actually a two model splash, but Star Lord, Beta Ray, and Thanos, and it's a really, really rude 15 threat list. It's not quite the version you would run if you were mainly a Guardians list, but it is a really strong pivot, just to have as kind of a backup plan for that 15 threat. Maybe dedicate one or two tactics cards to it as well, and I think it's at least an interesting thing you can do there. And then similarly, Asgard, there's a couple affiliated models already in Asgard, and I think a lot of those models appreciate Star-Lord's leadership. So while I don't think Star-Lord is getting a crazy amount of Thor's leadership, and you're probably not running him under the Asgard leadership, I think he's an interesting splash in an Asgard list, just to try and bring in that kind of, hey, suddenly we're Guardians of the Galaxy sort of splash here. But I think that pretty much does it for Star-Lord. This is definitely one of the shorter ones of these that I've made, and I think that's partially just because Star-Lord doesn't have all that much actually on his card that he does. His leadership is a really powerful part of his card, and it takes up a lot of the space on it. And the rest of his abilities, while certainly being good, are all relatively simple and generic. So there's not that much to kind of dive into in, what these specific abilities do and what kind of weird things you can do with them. I think full auto is obviously one of the more interesting and more splashable parts of his card, just being able to put out potentially four conditions with a single attack. Obviously, the odds of that are not great, but if you can give him some form of rerolls or something like that, splash him in with models that provide rerolls, like, oh, I don't know, Zemo or something. Man, I'm gonna have to run this in Hydra. It sounds like a lot of fun, actually. But if you can run him in places like that, you can definitely get a little bit of value out of that as well. And just anywhere else that's going to provide you with some rerolls, Wakanda or Iron Man Shield or something like that. I think there's an argument for those places as well. But yeah, I think he's got a lot going on for him. I certainly think he's a strong beast, and he's something that I think kind of gets overlooked because so many of the Guardians are really, really powerful. And I think it's important to acknowledge that Star-Lord isn't, he's not that same kind of piece of, he's going to be the center piece on the table. He's going to kill five of your models in one turn and call it a day. I mean, I don't think really anyone in Guardians is killing five models in one turn, but technically, I guess it's possible. Um, but I think the point I'm getting to is he's kind of a model that sits to the background and does his skirmishy thing, and he does it very well. So I think he's worth talking about kind of on his own, and where he might see play outside of Guardians. That is at least an interesting question in my opinion. But yeah, let me know down below if you guys have places you've tried splashing Star-Lord before, because man, I have to try him in Hydra now. If anyone's tried him in Hydra, please let me know how that went, because I'm very, very curious and may or may not be coming to a battle report sometime soon. Of course, now that I say that, I've dated this video, because if a battle report doesn't come out soon, or I don't actually know where the slots are in the schedule. The battle report might have already come out by the time this comes out, so I'm gonna stop thinking about that now and just close out this video, because we're doing really good for time, which is great. I've been trying to make these a little bit shorter to respect your guys' time if I can, but sometimes it's hard. Some characters have a lot of text and a lot of really cool synergies that I like to talk about. So, but we are going to wrap up this one, so I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, please do drop a like down below. Subscribe if you're new to the channel and you like these types of videos. We do these every Wednesday. And on Sundays, we have battle reports. So if you're interested in either of those things, join on in, and yeah, those will be available to you. But as far as this video is concerned, that is pretty much all I have to say. Once again, if you guys do have stuff that you want to kind of add on to this, stuff you like running Star-Lord with, places you like running him, that sort of thing, let me know down below. I'm really curious to hear what you guys think. And yeah, I think that's going to do it for this video. So until next time, everybody, have a great day. Peace.